How can you avoid trapping your teams? I want you to think about that because avoiding trapping your teams is something you can very accidentally do, not only as somebody outside of the team, some sort of leader, as a peer to a team, another team that uses something they made, or even actually inside of your team. You've done this through your own design and not seeing the trap you've laid before yourself. So I want to walk you through that. And what does it mean to be a trapped team? In this case, it means that you are now unable to move. You have locked yourself in. You can see things happening, you can reason about it, you can think about it, but no matter what you want to do, you just can't seem to change anything inside of your team, right? The flow of change is impossible on the things that you really need to change. So let's take a look at how that trap is created. And I call it locked-in syndrome. I'm borrowing this term from a very terrifying pseudocoma. That's a real medical condition. And the way it works is essentially you can have a team. In this case, I'm calling them an unhealthy stream, right? So that's an unhealthy stream inside of a platform group. And what they're doing is they're exposing something as a service and they're interacting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, let's call it 10 teams, right? And so 10 teams are consuming this thing that they're offering. Now, on one hand, that could sound quite desirable, right? It could be that all of these teams are moving fast and able to, use that one piece of technology instead of having to reinvent it 10 times. The problems don't come at the start. The problems come a little bit later when you haven't looked at certain topics here. So you can have this X as a service and be healthy, but you can also be unhealthy. And here's what happens is the stuff under the surface that coerces this team to be locked in and trapped. First of all, the platform wants to change their service, right? So let's say this line here for service, they want to change and they want to break backwards compatibility, right? Let's imagine a situation where they have something that sends an email, right? That's a fairly common piece of software in a lot of companies is you have some email service owned by some team somewhere. You might have 2 or 3 competing ones, but in this case, let's assume there's just one, everybody's using it. And they want to change it, right? They want to update their API protocol. They want to move to a new provider. They want to streamline some experience. They need to overcome some regulatory issue. Point is, they need to break backwards compatibility on the API that all the other teams are using. And they cannot or will not provide legacy support. And it's not so much up to the individual technical leaders in that team. This can actually come from a number of different ways, right? So first of all, it could be that they cannot do it. Like, of course, it could be that they don't want to provide legacy service. But what are the reasons for that other than simply ego and stubbornness? Could be we don't have time for that. We don't have money for that. We don't have resources for that. The knock-on effect of that could be that they're put into a position where it's just not possible to provide legacy support at the same time. It could be that the way it's implemented is impossible to bridge 2 technologies at once. It could be that there's a politics in the organization, by the way, that prevent them from ever trusting supporting anything legacy, and they want to make the play of we will not support backwards compatibility because we know if we allow you to do that, you will never upgrade your software. You will, all these 20 streams, right? Think about that. They offer something new. All of those need to upgrade to something new. Every one of them independently needs to come in and dedicate somebody on the team to go work on updating that API to the latest version. And it might not be a priority for all of them. And if you have just 1 or 2 of them kind of stuck in that legacy world, you might not be able to get that work done. You might have to run that legacy software forever, which means unhealthy stream has to maintain this new piece of technology and an old piece of technology that compete with each other for the same purpose for a very long time. So there can be a lot of reasons here why they cannot or will not provide legacy service, right? And I think that is something to consider, is it's not always so straightforward and it's not always about an opinion. Sometimes there's a lot at play here and, people are confusing and not obvious at how they come to their reasons. But I think if you can get that surfaced, you will come a long way in understanding how to break this challenge. Another thing here is causing other teams to break is not allowed. It could be that this is, for instance, here's something I see very common is you often have in grow up companies some centralized object that's the core of the entire business. In some companies, that would be your shipment ID. It could be your order ID. It could be a customer of some sort. Some central entity that your business was evolved around from its proto monolithic code based state before things broke apart. It could be that they are stewards of this technology, and all of these teams are users of it, and they need it. It's a core piece of what they do, but they've heavily coupled themselves to it, right? So causing other teams to break is not allowed. Because if you break, let's say, the finance team, and you break over here the customer onboarding team, something like this, we're going to lose significant revenue. So the confluence of all of these issues, plus this one here, more teams to collaborate with possible, is, you have to do a collaboration mode, right? Collaboration is high bandwidth, right? So I've seen this team roll out. I've seen special project managers get hired for this team in more than one company to kind of try to coordinate everybody on these teams. And the challenge here is every one of these teams has potentially a different thing that they need to do. Their mission might not be, go and update that API. So in this self-service environment where everybody's consuming from this, there's no, rules on legacy support, what the forcing function to get people to migrate off to something is. And you see this a lot in companies where we only work on user-facing visible products and never work on how the company works, making sure we run fit and lean and quickly. And you need to break backwards compatibility. You will end up in an unhealthy stream where over time, you cannot change the core pieces of your software, because changing it would require a monolithic change from everyone at once due to the way that your company forms social agreements with each other. So how do you get out of this? I think there's a few options here. First of all, if you cannot come to a way to, govern your technology and your process and ways of working across multiple teams, you cannot ever, or should not, reach a team where you have all of those streams that you're working with, right? You have to limit the scale of what your platform can reach, because you do not have the organizational maturity to handle that at that scale. It means you as a company will run with higher complexity. You will run slower than you could, but that's one way to fix it. The other way to fix it is to attack, these different things here, right? So look at this. Platforms want to change their service. For instance, it could be that this team that wants to change their service cannot or will not provide legacy support. What if they did get, a bunch of these teams to move over, and at some point in time, you had an agreement that one of these teams became the provider of that legacy system, right? So it could be possible that you have a necessity for two competing systems. It could be a necessity that's not well understood to own and evolve that over time. But it could mean that this team should not own and evolve it over time, as they're on a different mission. And if these teams are actually cohesive with that legacy mission, and those two pieces of technology need to evolve on separate paths for different reasons, this is possible. And then I think down here, right, cannot or will not provide legacy support. I think that is one of the interesting topics. We can overcome this just by increasing the maturity of how our tech leadership governs the technology that we write, right? Having a voice for, we have a timeline, this work needs to be done by this time. We've pre-figured that out. We understand the costs. You need to have, alignment between all of these people on the importance of that work, and kind of govern yourselves through some conventions and rules around that, that need very strong reasons to not follow. Not a lot of companies can reach that very easily. I think from what I've seen, it takes 6 months to a year to get that process implemented, where you can have, strong governance over IT and technology and make sure that things follow. We said we're going to, turn this into brownouts and blackout periods. We're going to do that. You all knew, right? This is going to take some time to say we have conventions, we follow the conventions if you don't have them already. You might be in an organization where that's undesirable. That's another, challenge to overcome. And then additionally, other teams to break is not allowed. I think if causing other teams to break is not allowed, the other maneuver here is similar to that first one where you take your piece of technology and move it into another thing, is you take the risk and you move the risk into those streams, right? So that could be those streams now need to build the risky part of their system that's going to break and make it less risky. Could mean circuit breakers, it could mean a queue, could mean just reducing the risk of breakage, right? So how do you do that? It could be that it's actually undesirable for these teams to migrate because the tech debt involved is too high to change it, right? This could also be another thing here, is the tech debt to overcome the problem will take too much work to fix, so the cost is too high. So it could be that this team up here actually doesn't need to work on, changing their service. It could mean that they have to find a way to reduce the cost to make that change for all these other teams, right? And that could be a different approach entirely, right? But all these things combined will prevent a stream from being able to create change. And this is just why it's really important to figure out the life cycle of how you will own and evolve those interactions over time. So you can make sure that today we are on a stable X as a service interaction. We're going to change that at some point. What does going into collaboration mode look like, right? So now it's X as a service. Going to collaboration, is it everyone at once, or is it, one at a time? We can do that. So this is a good way to govern this cognitive load, the team health, the even the software architecture, to be honest, right? That is a software architecture, socio-technical diagram of your software architecture, right? It hints at the backing systems needing to change. So I think there's a lot you can learn from this, and a lot of ways that I've just shown you that you can avoid trapping your teams, right? Especially for, platform teams. I think we can see this a lot for, I use the case of sending an email, but I think this happens a lot. Again, as I said, I use the case of that central business object that's key to your business. This happens. And a third thing here is, a lot of companies have a misunderstanding of platform and DevOps, and they think it means there's going to be a team that runs my software for me in production, and they're the ones who know all those cloud technologies. So one team will write our code and hand it over to a platform, and they will run it. This is another interaction mode where they will end up being locked in because the interactions they have need to be stable. They can't break that interaction mode. And it has to be for a long time over too many teams for them to get away from, right? So that's just some of the ways that you can avoid trapping your teams, and ways you will trap your team if you're not careful.